So, last session we mentioned briefly about the K-8 teacher licensure requirements. We're going to look a little more in depth to those and expound upon those requirements because that is a question that we continually get is, am I required to get this license if I'm going to teach the coding block? What about the embedded standards? Are we required to have our teachers licensed? And the quick answer is no, you're not required. But obviously we want more teachers to add that endorsement. We think it makes them more marketable as they're looking at different options. It also can allow you to have a greater use for them. You know, my wife, who is a K-5 librarian, she's adding this licensure because unfortunately in this day and age we're seeing where our physical libraries are starting to disappear to a certain extent. We have schools writing waivers, right or wrong, that they're reducing the number of libraries that are out there in the schools. So this is a perfect opportunity for some teachers in those areas, or just teachers that want a change, to make themselves more marketable, to give themselves skills are needed. So the specific requirements, if we're talking about the coding block for grades 7 or 8, once again, there's no requirement for the licensure. I think it's beneficial. I think it will help teachers as they look at this knowledge, and it may be something that we have to reevaluate down the road. But as of right now, there is no requirement. Same thing for our K-8 embedded standards. Now, with the teacher licensure requirement, and we've already talked about courses at a high school level, we continue to also get questions about what courses are middle school CS courses. So we have the coding block, and the coding block, obviously we have a placeholder course code, but the coding block can be taught in an integrated, integrated in the standpoint that you have a class and you block off 4 to 5 weeks and say, we're going to teach the coding block during this 4 to 5 weeks. It's not a Friday only throughout the school year type thing. There's no continuity there, and your students aren't going to learn what they should learn. There really has to be a block of time. That's the reason it's called block. Or it could be taught as an explore period for a block of time, or it could be a pull-out class. Or we have some schools that are teaching a actual high school course. They've gotten approval to move it down to the 8th grade. And guess what? If you teach our high school first year programming course at 8th grade, those students have also met the coding block requirement through that. And schools denote that requirement, that they're meeting that requirement in a certain course, by a SIS data flag. So counselors out there, people who are looking at the registration, if you go in the SIS data for the course that you want to meet, or that you're saying is meeting the coding block requirement, there's a data field in there, much like the Digital Act, what was it, 1280, Digital Act 1280 flag that was in the SIS data. So that's how schools can denote that. We do get a lot of schools that ask about, well, we're teaching X curriculum products, and I really don't want to say a name today, but we're teaching this particular course that's part of this curriculum vendor. How do we code that? You took away those codes, and yes, we did in CS. We took away all vendor-specific codes in CS, and that's not because we don't like those vendors. I love some of those vendors, and I love the products that they have. It's that we, at a state, we set standards. We don't set that a school has to use this particular curriculum product. That's part of the benefit of having local control. We want y'all to decide what's best for your area, what's best for your students, and what's best as far as curriculum goes for your students. So at a middle school level, we do have activity codes, computer science activity codes. So your students are not receiving a high school credit for those middle school courses anyway. So at a state perspective, there's no real reason that there should be a separate code for each curriculum vendor product. So what we basically did is we set up 3 computer science activity codes that schools can use as placeholders, whether it be a robotics club that they're doing, whether it be a particular mobile application, not our high school mobile applications course, but an introduction to mobile application or introduction to programming. So we've set up 3 specific codes for that. All other previously provided middle school course codes for CS courses or activities are invalid, and they should not be used. So I know there was a app makers course code out there that was out there for a while. That no longer should be used. You should be using one of these activity codes. So just want to clarify that a little bit. And once again, the embedded standards at a K-8 level, there are embedded standards for each grade level. And I mentioned my wife earlier, who is a K-5 librarian. She actually provided professional development to her school there in Bryant regarding these embedded standards early on. And some of the feedback early on was, well, we're just getting more stuff added to us. And my wife, she's kind of like me. She's actually a redhead. She's a little more direct than I am sometimes. She said, we're already doing this. You just need to change your vocabulary and your thought processes of how to approach it. And that's kind of my perspective. If you have a math teacher that's not teaching problem solving or computational thinking or logic at any grade level, Greg, I'm sorry, but you probably need to look for a new math teacher.
Right.
If you have a science teacher that's not teaching problem solving, same thing. If you have a PE teacher that's not teaching collaboration, Dr. Gocher, you probably need to find a new PE teacher, right? So, so these are, a lot of those K-8 embedded standards are not, in fact, there's only one entire strand that is a completely new standard to a school. And that's the standard, that's the strand that talks about a student will use a computer program to solve a problem. Now I'm paraphrasing, but basically that's the only new thing that in that whole list of documents that cannot be found somewhere else in what the school standards require across our subject areas. And that's how we want it taught. We don't want it taught as computer science pullout. Now, you're welcome to do that, and we encourage that also, but these standards are really to be taught in an embedded standard in every class. Because guess what? Little Susie, who has Miss Turner, and I'm not saying you teach at a lower level, but let's say for a second you did. Little Susie has Miss Turner who teaches her 3rd grade English. Guess what? To little Susie, Miss Turner is everything. And my kids especially, teacher can tell them something, and I can, not that I disagree with teachers, but I can have a different perspective, and guess what? That teacher is usually right over daddy. And that's the power that our teachers have. And what I want little Susie to see at 3rd grade level is that Miss Turner is talking about computer science. She's talking about algorithms. Even though you in this hypothetical are not a computer science teacher, you're talking about unplugged activities. And I think that's so important as we look at the lower grade levels. Karma, what are your thoughts? Since you know about the standards and you kind of have this perspective, what are your thoughts about that?
I've not studied the K-8 standards as much, but I have looked through them several times, and you're right. It's a matter of changing your language a little bit, using the word algorithm at lower levels so that kids don't think that's some strange thing that just pops up when you take Algebra 1.
That's right.
And for the teachers to know they're already doing those things. It's not another thing we're putting on their plate, because teachers don't like to hear that kind of thing. But it's good to know that it's stuff they're already doing.
And it was really valuable when we looked at those standards kind of across the disciplines, again, to realize how much of the suggestions even that are offered as examples in those embedded K-8 standards really support the instruction in the other curriculum areas as well.
Absolutely.
So they're very engaging, appropriate activities and suggestions and examples that are there that are really going to strengthen kids' skills across the board. So.
And the standards are written so well. They're not full of a lot of jargony things. They're clear to understand. They have examples of how you could implement that. There's notes under each different strand of how you could do these things. This is not all inclusive, but here are some ideas where you could do these things. So it's teacher friendly. It's very teacher friendly.
Well, and the thing about those K-8 standards, though we labeled them as computer science, a lot of them are just digital literacy standards.
Right.
And that I go back to the librarian or finding other teachers to step up in this lead teacher role. That's just helping other teachers understand how to be digitally literate and how to use that within their content area. So, what were they supposed to do? The K-8 standards are designed to introduce computer science concepts as embedded content across all content areas. That's what we want them to do. We don't want them to be taught in isolation.
Anthony, what supports do teachers have to become more comfortable. Since they can carry a standard teaching license, don't have to have the extra endorsement, but they may have some anxieties in teaching that. What are some opportunities that we provide for teachers across the state?
Sure. Well, Greg mentioned earlier the CS specialists, and I can't give them enough accolades in the work that they've been able to accomplish. You know, one thing that we did early on was we decided that we would centralize all professional development by our CS specialists. So the professional development that Northwest Arkansas is getting is very similar, same basic format as the professional development that Southwest, and it's available in all co-ops. Every one of my specialists are out there in every co-op across the state. So though they may not be assigned to this particular co-op, they're providing instruction. They're going to schools in every one. So we have multiple professional development offerings. We have a K-8 offering. We have a coding block offering. Those are kind of expedited trainings that we're providing in every co-op across the state this summer. But we also have this new lead teacher program, and that's the long-term systemic change that we're going to see phenomenal growth in the K-8 arena that I see, and that is developing local teachers to be able to support other teachers in their building. So they will go to a 5-day professional development session. That particular program allows them a $100 stipend for each day that they go if they're into this or if they're part of this K-8 lead teacher program. Then they are actually eligible for another $1,700 stipend to do different things, become fully endorsed, and then provide additional PD back to their school. But the state in itself is providing those professional development opportunities through our specialists. Then I also want to tout, Arkansas Ideas and AETN has just been a phenomenal partner in the computer science initiative. I can't say enough about the work that the team does. One of the things that they do that a lot of our teachers and administrators are still missing out on is every educator across Arkansas at this point has free access to the full lynda.com library through Arkansas Ideas. And I guarantee there's something on that lynda.com library that every one of us can learn from. I've went on there and I've taken a multitude of courses. I've even taken a course in digital photography, even though it doesn't have anything to really do with computer science. It's something that I wanted to learn about. It's part of that professional growth, and so there are a lot of different opportunities.
Good, thank you.
The listserv, Anthony, like you said, is very active, and if there were more K-8 teachers that could join the listserv and talk to one another that way, I think that's helpful too.
Great, thank you. We also want computer science to be a practical application. We don't want, while there are certain topics that a teacher may have to say, okay, we're going to do this particular thing, we want it to be taught in a master standard type thought process. What are you teaching in mathematics that could be supported through this? What projects are you doing that can support this? In science, that's a perfect example. What can we digitize? It's not about always writing programs, but how can we use computers to better this process or computing related concepts? So I just want teachers to think about that as they move forward. And of course, we hit a little bit on assessment earlier. Formal assessment of these standards is not required. Of course, we want teachers to monitor and measure student learning through their normal classroom activities. I mean, that formative assessment, that day-to-day assessment that teachers undertake is so important. I've already stated that the standards should be embedded across all content areas. There's not a requirement for the 528 licensure. And in short, and I'm just going to read it directly off the presentation, ADE wants all teachers in all content areas engaging in discussions surrounding computer science and digital literacy as appropriate for their content area and age of students. We keep circling back to that appropriateness of the computer science education. So as we wrap up this session, any last minute thoughts on requirements, courses, things of that nature, things that we're missing at an ADE level or at an agency level that we need to clarify?
I think one opportunity with Act 930 and the student success plans, we could have conversations with our 8th graders and having that career pathway. So I think there's a great opportunity for districts to be proactive in creating those computer science pathways, whether it's engineering, robotics, whatever the different career pathways could be. I think we need to take advantage of that, because since we're required to do it, let's allow us having those conversations with our students and parents and moving students in those career pathways in their high schools.
Great. Yeah, great. Karma, anything? Greg?
Nothing.
Just one of that popped into my mind is about the distinction and communication between computer science, teaching and learning, and robotics. I know that's one, when we talk about parent perception and telling our story, that's another big deal in our district, is robotics and engineering, and those things seem to kind of always be lumped together, and so kids who maybe have expressed an interest or who see themselves going into maybe kind of a robotics or competitive robotics area, those are computer science kids. But one of the things I'm reflecting on more now is how much broader the funnel is for computer science. It is great for those kids who have that interest and want to pursue robotics, but it's not just for them either, so.
That's a great point.
In the K-8 area, I have a great niece who's in the 3rd grade, and she's going to a coding robotics camp this summer, and she is just excited beyond measure, and to go to school in summer, she's excited about that, which I think that says a lot.
Well, and Karma, that's a perfect point, and I think that's a big portion of as we move forward and under this, what opportunities beyond just the classroom opportunities are schools allowing for their K-8? Are you doing any type of after-school lunch clubs? I know that all that stuff is extra, it takes extra money, it takes time, but that's really how you're going to see systemic growth within your communities. I know for a long time Bryant has fed their engineering program by doing summer camps at a school level surrounding kind of an introduction to that, and I've always been so impressed by that, and I'm sure other schools are doing very similar things, but I would encourage all of our schools to look at what are they doing to support this more than just in a classroom manner. How are they engaging those students that may not want to be programmers, but they're per se, but they would program if it was tied to building a robot that they had to program.
Exactly.
So, with that, we're going to come back in a little bit and we're going to talk about the computer science flex credit and hopefully clear up some confusion about it.